The Boston Celtics are about to pull off the impossible. The Celtics were down 0-3 at the beginning of the series versus the Miami Heat, and after an incredible last-second win on a shot by Derek White, the Celtics currently find themselves tied 3-3 going into Boston for Game 7. And if the Celtics are able to win in Game 7 at home, this will be the first team in NBA history to ever come back from an 0-3 deficit. And based upon the momentum and how the Celtics have been winning these last 3 games, it just seems like the Boston Celtics are in a great position to be the first team in history to come back from an 0-3 deficit. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports. I make opinionated NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. Going into the playoffs, the Boston Celtics were seen as one of the favorites to make it out of the Eastern Conference. And surprisingly, when the Milwaukee Bucks lost in the first round, people had the Boston Celtics as heavy favorites to make it to the finals. And after the Celtics were able to win relatively easily against the Atlanta Hawks in the first round, and they were also able to win in a tight series versus the Philadelphia 76ers, going into the NBA Conference Finals against the Miami Heat, most people saw the Boston Celtics as heavy favorites in that series. But after the Miami Heat were able to take a 3-0 series lead after winning both Games 1 and Games 2 in Boston and also winning Game 3 at home for the Heat, that was an absolute shocker to basically everybody. Because not only did people see the Celtics as relatively heavy favorites, they also at the same time definitely didn't expect the Heat to win both of their games on the road and also win Game 3, which was a must-win at that point for the Boston Celtics. And after being down 0-3, most people thought that series was once again over and the Miami Heat were going to make it to the NBA Finals. And the performance that the Boston Celtics were putting up, and especially Jayson Tatum, was just something that was extremely disappointing and something that they wouldn't be able to live down. But after the Celtics were able to win Game 4, which was an absolute must-win for them, and going back to Boston, they were also able to win Game 5, which is something that people didn't necessarily see as all that shocking. Game 6 was going to be the real determining factor for who wins the series. And I would say for the most part, the Celtics were doing the better work in that Game 6. Jayson Tatum was having a really good game. The Celtics as a whole were playing relatively well, and they found themselves up by 8 points with around 3 minutes left to go in the game. And at that point, it seemed like the game was closed out, but just like the Miami Heat were able to do in the first round when they were up 3-1 against the Milwaukee Bucks, and they had a decent deficit late in that game, they were able to come back also on the Boston Celtics and ended up taking a 1-point lead with only 2 or 3 seconds left to go. But during that final possession for the Boston Celtics, they were able to pull off the impossible. As Marcus Smart initially missed that game-winning shot, Derek White was able to get a putback layup and ended up winning that game for the Celtics and pushed them to Game 7 and potentially push them to the NBA Finals. It was absolutely shocking the way the Celtics were able to win that game, and the game as a whole was pretty shocking, to be honest. The fact that the Heat were able to come back from a pretty significant deficit late, and then the Celtics were able to hit a game-winning shot, just turned out to be a crazy game. And now going into Game 7, the Celtics have all the momentum in the world. But one thing that I do want to mention about that final possession for the Heat, I think it actually was a pretty bad decision by head coach Erik Spoelstra. Because I thought throughout the entire series for the most part, Spoelstra was running circles around Mazzulla, but in that final possession, I thought it was a poor decision to keep some of their shooters out there. Because there was only 2 seconds left, obviously you only needed to play defense, and if you got to stop, you win. So it was kind of confusing why Duncan Robinson was even in the game in my opinion, and he made a crucial mistake by not boxing out Derek White, and that turned out to be the game winner for the Celtics. But now the question is, what is my official prediction for Game 7? Who do I think is going to win? Well, I think when you look at the series between these two teams, it's been a very interesting one. It's been a tale of two series. The first 3 games, Jimmy Butler was the one that was playing very well, the Heat were looking flawless as a unit, and the Boston Celtics and Jayson Tatum weren't playing well whatsoever. But in the second half of the series, Jayson Tatum has been the one that's been playing great. Jimmy Butler hasn't been playing all that well, and the Boston Celtics as a unit have been looking very good. And going forward to this Game 7 matchup, it's pretty clear that the Celtics not only have all the momentum, but they're also going to have the home court advantage. And I think based on that, most people are going to say that the Boston Celtics are going to win this matchup relatively easily, but at the same time, one thing that I do want to mention is you can never count the Miami Heat out. Even though it seemed like, and in my opinion also I agree with this, that the Game 6 matchup would determine who wins the series. If the Heat win, obviously they would just win straight up, but if the Celtics won, they would have all the momentum and they would have a great chance to beat Miami at home, especially if they were able to beat the Heat on the road in Game 6, which they're able to do. But at the same time, with that being said, whenever you talk about Jimmy Butler, Eric Spoelstra, and the Miami Heat, they've been able to do a ton of amazing things throughout these playoffs so far. So even though it doesn't look great for them at this point going forward to Game 7, I still don't think you can count them out. But with that being said, at this point, I definitely would favor the Boston Celtics. In the last 3 wins that they did have, they did look like they were controlling the game for the most part. Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown were playing very well, and the Celtics as a whole were just playing very, very good basketball in the last 3 games. And I think the determining factor for who wins Game 7 would be the matchup between Jayson Tatum and Jimmy Butler. If Jayson Tatum has a really good game in Game 7, just like he's been having in Game 6 and Game 5, even in Game 4, then I do think the Celtics have a really good chance to win Game 7 and go to the NBA Finals. But if Tatum doesn't play all that well, specifically in the 4th quarter, and Jimmy Butler plays well for the most part in that game and plays even better in the 4th quarter, then I do actually think the Miami Heat have a really good chance to win that Game 7 and go to the NBA Finals for themselves. Now, one thing that I will say is I do think Jayson Tatum has a little bit more of a buffer zone than Jimmy Butler does. And what I mean by that is I think if Tatum plays relatively well, he still could get a win for his team, because the rest of his guys on his roster just have a ton of talent. Jaylen Brown has the potential to put up some crazy games. Marcus Smart does a really nice job to contribute. Derek White does a great job as well. There's just so many different guys on this roster that contribute. And when you look at the Miami Heat, they also have some guys that can contribute, but in my opinion, it's not on the same level as the guys that the Celtics have. So I really think it's extremely important, and Jimmy Butler literally just has to play very, very well to give his team a chance to win that Game 7. But for Jayson Tatum, I do think he has some leeway in that. But just the fact that we got here to Game 7 is just absolutely crazy, and it's historic within itself. Just a couple teams that were down 0-3 were ever able to make it back to a Game 7. And this year's Boston Celtics could officially put their hat in that corner, but at the end of the day, I don't think they're going to care unless they end up winning Game 7. And then that would make them the first team ever to come back from a 3-0 deficit. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening in this Game 7 and in the rest of the playoffs for either the Miami Heat or the Boston Celtics. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the Boston Celtics could be the first team ever to come back from an 0-3 deficit, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.